Good evening, everybody. Evidently, my microphone was muted. Thank you, Miss Christie, for letting me know. I was letting y'all know that all the prayer requests that we had from Sunday are pretty much the same as far as I know. If anybody has an update, let us know. We'll continue to pray for you, but continue to pray for all those who are not well and that we've been praying for. If you have an update, something you want me to read out loud, let me know, and I'll do my best to read it out loud for everybody. I was letting you know that we are in Ruth chapter 2 this evening, and it's a pretty good story. I was saying that all the best stories you'll ever read are in the Bible, and if they're not, they're inspired by the Bible, or the Bible did it first. It's a lot of fun, and just about any genre you could hope for. There's a lot of action in the Bible. There's some horror even in the Bible. There's some romance in the Bible, and you get some of that in the book of Ruth and in other portions of Scripture. And so hopefully this is something that you'll enjoy. I think there's a little something for everybody in here in our lesson tonight. So hopefully you'll enjoy yourself tonight. Amanda says, pray for Dale. He's in the hospital with a twisted bowel and may need surgery. So be in prayer for. This is, of course, her uncle. His name is Dale, and he would very much appreciate your prayers this evening. You guys continue to feel like Dale, David's brother, is in the hospital. Yeah, that's what we just said. Okay. Just read it out loud and everything. All right. So if you have more prayer requests or things you want to talk about, be sure to leave that comment. I'll stop what I'm doing and read them. But I'm going to go ahead and jump over to our Bible study at this time. All right. We should be good. Audio's still here. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to move things around. And Amanda, I'm going to need you, if somebody leaves a comment, it'll be up here. So I'm going to need you to flag me down or say something. Okay? So let me swap this up over here. All right. Okay, so we are in Ruth chapter 2. Very good. Y'all can read that now. Yeah, okay. All right, so in our story this evening, we see... You okay? Okay. In our story this evening, we see Ruth meeting Boaz for the very first time. And if you don't know who Boaz is, that's what this chapter is all about. So we kind of get started in the chapter at the very top with Ruth trying to find work. In verse 1, it said, Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. So we talked about Elimelech, we talked about his sons last week in Ruth chapter 1 and the tragedies that their family were dealing with at that point. And so we've grown past that. Naomi and Ruth have come together in Israel, and this is the story of just them trying to survive right now. It says in verse 2, Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. So it's very beneficial for Naomi that Ruth is here, because otherwise she would have no means of getting food for herself or having food provided for her. It says in verse 3, she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. So her hap means like her fortune or her luck. So basically what's happened is she has gone to this field to find work. What they would do is they would open, these people who owned land and would grow things on it, they would open up their fields during harvest time, certain portions of it for the public. And they would help reap parts of the harvest and would be paid an amount for it. or they would be allowed to take that harvest home with them, one or the other. And so evidently it was this part where she was gleaning in this field and reaping, and she was earning money for food and that sort of a thing. And it says it just so happens, that's how we would say it. We would say it just so happens that she was working in a field belonging unto a man named Boaz. Now, Boaz was of the kindred of Elimelech. That's going to be really, really important at the end of our lesson, that she happened to land in a field belonging to a man who was of the kindred of Elimelech. So hang on to that thought until we get toward the end of our lesson, because it says in verse 4, "And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and said unto the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered him, The Lord bless thee." So he's coming to check on his work, and in verse 5 it says, "Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, Whose damsel is this?" So immediately Ruth catches the eye of Boaz. He sees her, and he says, "Wow, who is that?" So he comes in, and as far as we can tell, that's the first thing he asks. He doesn't ask about how the harvest is going. He doesn't ask about how anything else on his land is doing. He asks about this woman. He asks about Ruth. It was love at first sight. Have you ever heard of love at first sight? Ruth and Boaz was love at first sight. You know, I believe that there is an Eve for every Adam. That wasn't a joke. So you don't have to laugh at that. You can stop now. As her husband, I'm a little offended. There's an Eve for every Adam, and my wife goes, Excuse me? That's concerning. She's dying over there now. It is. That's true. There's an Eve for every Adam. And Boaz felt incredibly infatuated by this woman, Ruth. And in verse 6, the servant that was over the reapers answered and said, "Is this the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country?" Oh, it is. He's not asking. He's telling him. This is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. So he's now learning a little bit about her, not just what she looks like, but the kind of person she is. That she came back with Naomi and is trying to help take care of her. She said, "I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and hath continued even from morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. So she came and asked for a job, and they basically gave her this job knowing that she was in pretty bad need. And that she might not be able to keep up. I mean, not because she's a woman, but because this isn't her profession, and these are probably people that have been doing this for years and years. But even if she's a little slower than everybody else, they gave her a chance because they know she needs the help. When did it become commonplace in our society and in our nation that we don't care anymore? When did that become the thing to do? But maybe the best thing for you to do as a businessman is to be cold-hearted. You know, the best thing for you to do as a businesswoman is to be uncaring and only make good decisions for your business. When did that become the case? What happened to a society that gave each other chances when we needed it? You know, that jobs weren't just about you helping grow the machine of business, that they were about people. And that, yes, some people are going to be slow to learn the business, but that we have compassion for people. What happened to that? That all we care about is efficiency. I can tell you, some of you think that's the way it is. That's not the way it always was. It's your selfish, stinking, stupid greed that caused that. They've given this woman, Ruth, a chance here because they know she needs it. If she was around in America in 2025, she'd be starving under a bridge somewhere. Nobody's going to help her out. God help us, man. As a young man, I can tell you, there was a time in this society, looking for a job, had every business in Roanoke had my application, and I still had no job because I wasn't qualified for anything. What happened to us, folks? It's a shame. It's a travesty. We're talking about Christian businessmen who don't behave like Christ at all. Behave more like that rich young ruler who came to the Lord and said, "Oh, Lord, I've kept all the commandments. I'm a good person." And the Lord said, "Well, go and sell everything you own, give half of it away, and then you can call yourself a good person." And he couldn't do it. Hey, that's our Christian businessmen today who think they're Christian because they keep the commandments. But the commandment they don't keep is to love thy neighbor as thyself. We're not charitable. We don't care. We're not compassionate. God help us. So she worked from morning until evening, and she only took a short break in the house. So she might not have been a professional at this yet, but she worked just as hard as everybody else. She worked just as hard as any of the men out there working in that field. Can I say to you, this was not her first choice? She didn't grow up hoping to do this kind of work. But it's where she found herself at this point in her life. Can I say to you, you might be in a place in life right now you didn't think you'd wind up, but it's not permanent. You just keep trusting the Lord and He'll keep bringing you to good places. Not always places you thought you would go, maybe not always the places you decided you wanted to be at, but He will keep bringing you to good places. She was strong, and she was willing to put in the work. And Boaz saw these things about her and began to learn about her, that he didn't just love the way that she looked, he also loved the kind of person she was. So a few things he knows about her already, he likes. She's compassionate toward her widowed mother-in-law. When she had every excuse to go and start over with somebody else and live an easier, happier life, she chose to be loyal to her family, and she chose to take care of Naomi, her mother-in-law, her only family she had left. And she didn't have to do that. It shows compassion. She's willing to work hard from sun up to sundown and do whatever it takes. And that work ethic and that kind of determination, he loved that about her. And he's learning these things about her that he loves more and more. But not only is he learning about her from a distance, but then we see, starting in verse 8, that they begin to speak with one another. In verse 8, Boaz said unto Ruth, "Hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels, and drink of that which the young men have drawn." So, as you have in areas like Israel's not very large, so a lot of land butts up with each other. So she might have very easily accidentally wandered into somebody else's field with the people that work in those places, and Boaz wants her to be very, very sure that she's staying on his property with his people. Now, this is because he wants to keep her safe. First and foremost, this is the reason. He wants to keep her safe. Obviously, he'd like to keep her in close proximity because he wants to get to know her better, and he's slowly falling in love with her. But more than that, he's trying to keep her safe. We know that for a couple of things we just read. He said, "Abide here fast by my maidens," at the bottom of verse 8. And then in verse 9, he said, have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? Right? So he wants her to stay fast, to stay with his maidens, so that they can help keep her safe from the other men. Right? And he wants her to abide in his field so that he can instruct his men not to touch her. He can punish those that try to break his rule, and there are ways that he can protect her. Right? So, in other words, a very beautiful woman out in a field where nobody can see you a whole lot, there's opportunities for some evil men to do some evil things. We don't have to go in a lot of great detail. But Boaz wants her safe. As a guy, as a man, I can tell you that's instinctual for us. Is for the people that we love, we want to protect them. We want to make sure that you're safe. We don't want you to have to be looking over your shoulder or worried about somebody coming after you or worried about what's going to happen. We want you to be safe. So we want you to take precautions to make sure I can't always be there, but I want you to make sure that you can be safe. Right? After somebody was trying to come after Lizzie one time in the grocery store, we took precautions. Right? Amanda's now got mace on her keychain. She's got knives in her purse. And she is very, very safe now. We've taken precautions. When she goes, we've taught Lizzie to stay, in this side with her mother on this side of the basket. Don't go over to the other side by yourself. There are precautions that we take now. Right? That's because I, as Lizzie's father and Amanda's husband, I want them to be safe. Right? This is our instinct. And this is his instinct for the woman that he is learning to love. Right? Very, very important. In verse 10, it says that she fell on her face. This is her response to Boaz saying these things to her. He's come to her and he says, listen, it's very, very important to me that you stay here, stay with the women. I've instructed my men not to touch you. Just be careful and be safe here, please. So he says that she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground. Let me explain to you why these things need to be set in order, because Ruth is doing a man's job. The maidens don't glean. They don't reap the harvest. They're not separating sheaves of different things. The maidens work in the house or they assist the men. They don't do this kind of work. Ruth is the only woman out there doing this kind of really intense physical manual labor. And so he is not telling her, hey, don't do this. This isn't for you. Go work with the maidens. He's telling her, while you're doing this, be careful. Have these maidens stay with you, strengthen numbers and that sort of a thing. And so she is doing a man's job. Right? And it's so important to me to notice that, because so many times these conservative Christians will tell you that it's a woman's place to stay home and take care of the family. And I have no problem with that. I have absolutely no problem with a woman staying home and taking care of her family. If that's what she wants to do, then she should be able to do that. But that's not always possible, number one, and it's not always what she wants to do. Number two, we see Ruth out here gleaning in the fields, doing a man's job, working hard. And she's not committing any sin, folks. Her husband is dead. And she's got to eat. And sometimes it becomes necessary. Listen, we live in, I hate to keep going back to society, but the world in which we live right now is one that 99% of the time requires a 2-income household. At least. In our house, it's a 3-income household. I get paid from a job. Amanda gets paid from a job. And we live in the same house with my mother, who gets paid for a job. We live and it's like that for everybody. To the point where it's become part of the debate what parents should do with their children. Because school's not always in session. Some kids are too young for school. And both parents have to work. This subdivision Oh, that's a very good question, Miss Christie. Let me get to that after I finish my point. This subdivision right over here that we live in, the parents that go to their schools, when we talk to them, they deal with this problem. Every single one of them that I, at least, have ever heard from. I think Amanda, too. You've heard from more than me. Deal with this thing of when we're working and the school's not in session, I got to figure out what to do with my kids. They got to stay with a grandparent who's retired, or they got to pay for daycare, or they have to find something to do with their kids. And it's in the world in which we live, the women have to work a lot of the times. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a group of Christians out there who say that it's wrong for a woman to work a job, and it's not. And I want to make that very plain. As a matter of fact, it's a debate I've had in a specific church many times. Amanda remembers that. But Miss Christie asks, if the maidens don't work, why would she stay with them? She's staying with the maidens because it's possible, and I was trying to be vague about this, but I'm maybe being too vague to the point where it's going over people's heads. The maidens have been instructed, or at least some of them, I doubt the entire household has been told to, but at least some of these maidens have been instructed to stay with Ruth as she's working, or near her, in the same area as her as she's working, for fear that one of the men working in the fields might have an evil thought to force her. The fear is that she would be forced to to have physical relations with that man against her will. If you know what I'm trying to say, without saying it, because there's kids in the room in here, and I don't know where kids are in y'all's rooms where y'all are watching, but that's what he's afraid of. When you're in tall stocks like that and you're by yourself as a woman, the temptation that men have becomes quite evil. And he doesn't know all of the men that work for him, and he cares deeply for this woman, and he wants to make sure that nobody tries to take physical advantage of her, if you know what I mean. So that's why the maidens, that she's told to stay with the maidens as she works, is so that way there's less of a chance of her being physically abused in that way. I hope that makes sense. So I was maybe being a little too vague as to what the fear was there. Yeah, that is absolutely why. He says right there in verse, I mentioned it before, but in verse 9, he said, "Have not I charged the young men that they shall not touch thee?" That's what he's talking about. When he says in verse 8, abide here fast by my maidens. To abide fast means to abide hard, to make sure and be determined that you're with the maidens, the other women, right? Because the women protect the other women, and as should be the case even today. So that's sort of why. But in verse 10, we were talking about her response to this. It says she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground. Said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? So she doesn't quite realize that Boaz has caught the love bug. She's too busy trying to survive, right? Life has been hard for her for a very long time now, and she's not used to help. So she's been working hard trying to survive, trying to get by ever since her husband died. There's been nobody to take care of their family, and everything they have is because they had to work their guts out to get it. And Ruth is not used to anybody helping her ever. And how sad is that? In a nation of God's people, she's not used to people helping her out. How long it's been that they've lived here, I don't know, but it's probably been a good little bit. And they're desperate for food, and they're trying to earn it now, and she's doing everything she can to just survive. And here comes the owner of the property trying to make sure that she's safe, which is, I'm sure, a fear that she had too. She was probably afraid that one of these young men was going to take advantage of her as well. As a woman, I can imagine that that's the fear. So he comes along to make sure she's safe while she's working out here, and she doesn't expect that. Because she doesn't expect anybody to help make her life any easier at all, and that is tragic and that is sad. She's so grateful for this that she falls on her face. She bows herself to the ground, and she doesn't understand why he would help her because she's just a stranger. You don't know me. Why would you help me? My goodness. You wouldn't help somebody just because they're a stranger? That's awful. We should be helping strangers. You don't know somebody, so you're not going to help them? No, man, that's wrong. That's not what Jesus taught us to do. Help everybody, whether a stranger or not. Don't be so afraid to stop off on the side of the road and offer somebody a helping hand. Bonnie and Clyde was a long time ago. You ain't got to worry about that. Good. You know, you see a man with a sign trying to get some money for his food. Don't not hand him a $10 bill because you're afraid he's going to go spend it on drugs or liquor. Well, he's a stranger. I can't help him. I don't know what he's going to do. That's exactly right. You don't know what he's going to do. But Jesus said we should help people anyways. Right? Our desire and our compassion, it leaves a little bit to be desired. And Ruth here has been so used to just surviving on her own. The little tiniest bit of help is amazing to her. Someone who hasn't had help in a very long time, they're the most grateful. They're the most amazed. It irritates me so bad when I see somebody and they're so very grateful for the little tiniest thing that I do for them. I want to look at the people that have made life so hard for them and go, look at what you did. Look at what you did to this person. Do you not care? Are you without a heart? Have you no soul? Look at what you did to this person. His compassion, it hits her so hard. But we see his response. Boaz answered and said unto her, It hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, a nativity being the place where you're born. That's why it's called the nativity for Christmas, because it's talking about him being born. The land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. I love that word, heretofore. That's a fun word, heretofore. It adds nothing to the sentence, but it's fun to say, heretofore. It reminds me, like if you ever heard somebody say, then, now, yet, don't you know? You know. In verse 12 it says, The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. So he's letting her know, yes, I do know who you are. You're not a total stranger. I know how good you've been to Naomi, and I know all that you sacrificed to do a good thing. That feels good, man. When somebody says, yeah, I know who you are. I know exactly what you did. And you're a great person for that. I can't imagine how that must have made Ruth feel. But she must have felt really good about it. But yeah, this is to confirm to us what I said earlier, that Boaz loves Ruth for her beauty on the outside, but also on the inside. Right? This is the mistake of young people. Young people looking for love, they look for love in all the wrong places, as the song goes. Because they say looking for love in all the wrong faces. That's because you're looking for love just in faces. You're only looking for physical attraction. You're only looking for how does my body chemistry react to their body chemistry. And it's so much more than that. You know, I have been trying to advise young people on what to look for in their potential future spouse and their life partner for many, many years now. I've had very few actually take my advice, but the ones that do wind up usually works out pretty good for them. looks should be secondary. When you're looking for somebody to spend a life with, you got to find somebody you enjoy having a conversation with. Someone you enjoy spending time with, someone who it's fun to be with them. You don't have to have all the same interests even, but you have to at least enjoy them enough to try out their interests. You know, I'm not a real big, lover of crafting or of creating things. I'm not the world's biggest baker or chef. But I love doing those things and trying those things out with Amanda. She enjoys laughing at me as I burn everything. It's really fun for her. You know, she enjoys watching me glue my hand to a piece of paper on accident, and me being like, well, now I don't know what to do. Or get glitter on me or something like that. Looks should be secondary. And fortunately for people like me, we lucked out in getting both, the whole package. But looks should be secondary. And that was the way it was for Boaz. She was a looker, but he was interested at least as much in her heart and in her personality as he was in how she looked. And I know of young people out there who don't want to hear it from me, who are just looking for looks. They're not interested. His personality is secondary. If he's a looker, we'll figure the rest of it out. And no, you won't. You will not. You'll be married to a guy you hate for 2 or 3 years before you finally decide to leave him. And every part of that is wrong. From start to finish. Look for a heart at work first. Right? So, in verse 13, then she said, she responding to him, saying, I know how compassionate a person you are, and that's why I'm helping you out. She said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for thou hast comforted me. And for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I be not like unto one of thine handmaidens. So she's saying, you've spoken kindly to me, you've comforted me, you've made me feel good. And you've been friendly to someone who's nothing more than a handmaid. She goes, I'm not even one of your handmaids. I don't technically even work for you the way that your other handmaids do. I'm out here gleaning fields while they're out, probably like literally taking care of the household and taking care of the workers and so forth. And she says, I'm not even one of your handmaids, and you're still being nice to me. And how much that comforts her. How much you can do for a person with just a kind word. Lives may not be taken in sorrow by a single kind word. You could literally save a life with a single kind word. You never know. You just quite never know. But then we come to verse 14, and we see how Boaz begins to favor Ruth. In verse 14, Boaz said to her, at mealtime come thou hither, and eat of the bread, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and she reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves. And he reproached her not. So a couple of things, let me explain what this means, because you're probably reading this going, I have no idea what any of this means. So the sheaves mentioned in verse 15, let me go ahead. In the very first part, in verse 14, Boaz shows her favoritism by not only inviting her to this meal, because this was for all of the workers. Everybody who was gleaning in the fields was invited to this meal. So that would naturally include her anyways. But he's showing her favoritism by providing a vinegar dip for her bread, and by providing a large amount of parched corn at the meal that he invited her to. So this isn't something that just everybody gets. This was special for her. But even though she's being showed these favoritisms, Ruth continues to show humility by choosing to eat with the rest of the reapers instead of with Boaz. right? So she could have just really taken advantage of Boaz here and eaten at the head of the table and eaten the best of the food with the family and all that sort of thing. But instead, she's eating with the reapers at that table, that she's been a worker and she doesn't want to take any of these things for granted. She wants to remain humble. And that's what that indicates. Your position at the table indicates your importance. And she, being humble, says, I'm not very important at this table. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to get food for me and Naomi. So she humbles herself and sits with the workers. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter 5:5, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. Pride blinds you. When somebody is sneaking up to you and complimenting you and just really bragging you out and lifting you up, your pride blinds you to some of the things they might be trying to do to you. Pride can blind you to traps along the roadway. But if you're humble, you're like, my souffle was not that good. What is he trying to do? You see it better, right? We're clothed with humility. It enables us. It strengthens us. It says God resisteth the proud. God is not interested in prideful people. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be proud. It means you can't be prideful. Right? There's a difference in being proud of yourself and being prideful. Those are two different things. What it's talking about here is pride. There's nothing wrong with doing a hard day's work, looking back and being proud of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with doing a good job at something and looking back and being proud of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. What we're talking about is pride. It's puffing yourself up. It's letting your head inflate so that it doesn't fit through the front door. It's your ego gone mad. That we got to be careful of. But he gives grace to the humble. Right? And that's what Ruth was showing even at this meal. But we were going to talk about in verse 15. So in verse 15 it talks about these sheaves. He tells his young men, the other reapers, he tells them to let her glean among the sheaves and reproach her not. So to reproach somebody means to correct them, to scold them for doing something wrong. That's what reproaching them means. It'd be like if you're working out in the field somewhere and so you're doing something you're not supposed to, and he goes, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" That kind of a thing. So the sheaves are meant for Boaz and his household. Those sheaves are set aside for him. They belong to him. Nobody else is supposed to be gleaning from them. There's a specific part of the field that's for the public, that's for the reapers to work the field. This field over here is meant to be left alone. That's for Boaz and for his family. Now, Ruth, it was told of Ruth that if she goes too far into Boaz's fields and gleans into that which is supposed to be for him and his family, don't correct her. Don't tell her, hey, don't go over there. Just let her be. So she's given even more grace than just at the meal. She's given even more grace because of Boaz's great love for her. In the same way, this is a wonderful picture of New Testament love from God to us, because God gives us all grace because of his great love for us. Ephesians 2 is talking about the different walks the book of Ephesians does. And in verse 3, it talks about our conversation in time past, in the lust of the flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and how we were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. Right? That's what we served. Ourselves, our anger, our lust, these are the things that we served, was what I want in that moment. If I want to tear somebody's head off to feel better, that's what I'm going to do. If I'm going to decide I want someone, I'm going to go try and get that which I want. fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and so forth. But in verse 4, we have this phrase. It begins, but God. And that phrase, but God, indicates a change, that when God butted into our life, and when God began to change us, and we accepted him and allowed him into our lives and into our hearts to change us, that he put some things into us instead. It says, but God, who is rich in mercy. We were talking about Boaz, who is rich, right? For his great love wherewith he loved us. He's beginning to really learn to love Ruth stronger and stronger. We begin to see his favoritism toward her. With his great love wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins. So our depraved state, kind of very similar to the Ruth's physical depraved state. She was in desperate need of some help, and Boaz began to show that to her in the same way that we were in a depraved state spiritually. And the Lord came along and showed us mercy when we were dead in sins. And it says, hath quickened us together. That word quickened means to be made alive. There was a dead part to us spiritually somewhere that Christ quickened and made alive and brought us and resuscitated us back to life. But notice, not just quickened us, but quickened us together with Christ, a unity. The book of Revelations refers to it as a matrimony. Isn't that ironic that we see in Ruth this love and affection that's beginning to blossom between these two people? And it's a beautiful parallel between the Lord Jesus Christ and the sinner that becomes saved and becomes a sanctified person, a Christian, living that Christian life. But then we also see in verse 16, he said to the young men, as he's telling them, don't reproach or not, he says also, let fall some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them, that she may glean them, and rebuke her not. So, in other words, he's telling his young men to purposefully let handfuls of this barley that they are reaping fall behind for Ruth to find. He wanted to take care of her and help her succeed, and that's a wonderful thing. Because real love builds up. I want to encourage you in this. I want you to know this. Real love builds up. It doesn't tear down. It builds up. And what we see is Boaz having his workers leave behind some things for her to find. And this is a perfect picture of God and us. Because God leaves behind in life some handfuls of purpose. Now, they might necessarily come from Boaz's hand, but there was no doubt they were from Boaz. He instructed his young man to do that. And in the same way in life, God has let you discover some things about yourself or some blessings in life that he's made you feel like you've earned for yourself. And it may not have necessarily come out of the sky from a glowing hand from God himself, but make no doubt that those things that you have done for yourself and you have earned yourself are absolutely handfuls of purpose that God has left behind for you. The things that we have that we feel like we did by ourselves, nobody helped us, those are handfuls of purpose. God left those there for you. And as you read through the Bible as well, it's also a picture of some things that God leaves behind for you to find throughout Scripture as well. It's a beautiful parallel, this story of the handfuls of purpose. It says, so she gleaned in the field until even, in verse 17, and beat out that they had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. An ephah is about 23 liters. Of barley. It was quite a lot, and she was going to be able to get by for quite a long time on that. Her and Naomi. So I want to, in verse 18, it's the last section. There's a couple of things I want to read for you. It says, she went home after this, and her mother-in-law said unto her, where hast thou gleaned today, and where wroughtest thou? She said, blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. So she sees this 23 liters of barley that Ruth comes home with, and she realizes that someone has shown great compassion on her and Ruth for allowing her to take this barley harvest home with her. And for the first time in a long time, Naomi has something to be happy about. Remember last chapter, she's saying, call me not Naomi, call me Mara. Naomi means sweetness, Mara means bitterness. She was bitter and angry toward God. She was ranting on about how not evil, but how cruel that God had been with her and had forgotten her and so forth. And now she's seeing Ruth come home with this giant bag of barley for them to cook and eat off of. And she's, for the first time in a long time, got something to be happy about. We ought to be cautious about looking for problems. We have to train ourselves. It's not natural to us. It's going to require some mental and some spiritual work. But we got to train ourselves to look for blessings instead of problems. You're constantly on the lookout for what's going to fall out of the sky next so you can catch it and fix it and take care of it. That will never help you, and it will never work. When it falls out of the sky, you're going to have to catch it anyway. So there's no reason for you to try to prepare yourself for it. That does nothing for you except cause you mental, spiritual, and physical problems. What we ought to be on the lookout for are blessings. And this is what Naomi is learning. But then finally in verse 20, remember when I said at the very top of the lesson, remember this relation to the husband of Naomi that had passed away? That's important. Because in verse 20, Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. This is a whole different tune than what she was singing in the last chapter. Why? I'll tell you why. It says, Naomi said to her, The man is near of kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. Now, why does that matter? It matters because she's saying this man can quite possibly be what the law refers to as a kinsman redeemer. A kinsman redeemer was to redeem the family that was left behind by the passing of the man of that family. Usually it's a brother marrying the wife of his brother so that her and his brother's kids won't starve to death and have a provider. Naomi had a reason to be happy before, but now she has a reason to rejoice and to praise out loud because now she's starting to see, okay, God's got a plan. And I'm starting to see God's plan here. God's got a plan. This is what he wants to happen. So now there's hope. There's a light at the end of my tunnel. Sometimes, folks, that's all we need. It's just a little light at the end of our tunnel. You can't see the light sometimes, but God sees the light, and you just got to trust him to get there. Blocked by a corner or a curve. The light's there. You just can't always see it. Right? So now Naomi's got this that she sees, and she knows what's going to happen, and she's rejoicing out loud. She says, oh, God didn't forget about me. I just couldn't see the long-term plan. And believe me, the long-term plan, very, very important. At the end of this book, we'll see why. But that is our lesson for this evening. I want to thank you guys so much for being here and for being a part of the live stream. Be sure to like the live stream before you go because that does help us out. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it is a big, big help to this church. We'll be back on Sunday morning for our Sunday school hour, and we'll see you guys then. So until